welcome. As you might or might not be aware, it's Banned Books Week, and today I wanted to talk a little bit about what that is and why you might want to be aware of it. Banned Books Week is an annual event that's been held in the United States from the 1980s to the present day. It's sponsored by a group of organizations, including the American Library Association. I'm not currently working as a librarian, but I have my master's in library science and I've worked in libraries in the past, and that's how I became familiar with Banned Books Week. Every year there is a theme for Banned Books Week, and the one for this year is Books Unite Us, Censorship Divides Us. Although this event goes back only to the 1980s, of course the history of book banning and book burning goes back a long time before that. In fact, it goes back all the way to the ancient world. Did you know that a Chinese emperor once had a bunch of scholars killed so that they couldn't write a version of history that depicted him unfavorably? Did you know that Emperor Caligula tried to ban the Odyssey because he thought that the ideas presented in it were too focused on freedom and individualism? And while there are several stories that relate to the burning of the Library of Alexandria, leaving it unclear as to whether it was an intentional attempt at censorship or not, it certainly did result in the loss of a lot of books and a lot of knowledge. Book banning continued in medieval England, where you might be surprised to know that English or any modern language translations of the Bible were actually one of the most severely banned books of that time. While the Bible had already been translated into Latin at the time, it was believed that it was absolutely not acceptable to translate it into any modern language, a rule that England stood by for a long time, up until the King James translation, which is sometimes also called the Authorized Version. Copies of, for example, William Tyndale's New Testament translation were ruthlessly destroyed, and the translators responsible for works like this were persecuted. Book banning in America goes all the way back to Plymouth. It's widely believed that the first banned book in what would eventually become the United States was New English Canaan by Thomas Morton. This book was highly critical of Plymouth Colony and its governor, and as a result, the governor had it banned. Book banning has taken on many forms over the years, ranging from abolitionist literature being banned in southern states during the American Civil War, to anti-obscenity laws in the 19th century, to places like Nazi Germany, which banned books that they considered to be un-German. Of course, I don't mean to imply that modern-day American book banning is anywhere near on the level of some of these historical examples. It's much more common to see books be challenged or banned in a particular local setting, a specific school or school district, a specific library, or even if it is on a more statewide basis, because there have been a few bills lately that have gone that direction. There still isn't the attempt to make the book cease to exist and press criminal charges against the author and things like that. However, I think it's very important to be aware of how book banning and censorship in general have been used throughout history to suppress information and to keep people ignorant. I find it really ironic that 1984 and Fahrenheit 451, two mid-20th century dystopian novels focused on censorship, often make it onto lists of frequently banned and challenged books. Talk about missing the point. However, I think it's important to also note that most libraries do have a system in place for patrons to voice any objections that they have about books in the library collection, and most schools do have a procedure in place for if a parent wants to have their child exempted from a particular book that's assigned as required reading. I'm more knowledgeable about the library side of things, so I'm going to focus on that. There are definitely legitimate reasons why a patron might want a book removed or reclassified in a library. For example, maybe a book is nonfiction and it has seriously outdated information, in which case the library might want to replace that book with a newer edition or a newer book on the same topic. Or maybe it's a young adult novel, but it's been mistakenly categorized in the children's section. If the subject matter is more appropriate for teenagers than young children, or the required reading level to understand the book is too high, then that book might need to be recategorized and put in the teen section. In other cases, it might just be that a particular patron or group of patrons finds the book objectionable in some way. which might just be a matter of values or personal taste, particularly when it comes to children's books, because parents tend to be more concerned about what children are reading than adults are about what other adults are reading. The ALA Office for Intellectual Freedom compiles lists of the most frequently banned and challenged books each year, and the reasons that were given for banning or challenging those books. With challenging, by the way, just meaning that the book was objected to, but ultimately stayed in the library or the school curriculum. I think it's interesting, actually, to look at the reasons that are given for books being challenged or banned, and the ways that that has changed over time. For example, it used to be very common to see books be banned or challenged for depictions of magic and witchcraft, but that's not a reason that's commonly given in the present day. Looking at the ALA's infographic that was made for this year, at the bottom we have this word cloud. And as you can probably see, the number one thing that jumps out at you right away is sexually explicit as the most common reason given. And obscene is right up there as well. Others that seem to be common reasons given in the past year: LGBTQIA, woke, and critical race theory, which my guess would be that this reflects an increasing diversity in literature and an increasing emphasis on issues that may make some people feel uncomfortable. Obviously, it's very much the case that not all books are appropriate for all ages, and that some books do contain difficult or controversial subject matter. I think that it's important to be discerning about what reading material one chooses for oneself, and while I'm not a parent, I do think that it's reasonable for parents to be aware of what their children are reading and making sure that it's age appropriate. And I think it's important for teachers and librarians to be thoughtful about which books they select. However, I think it's also worth noting that not everybody's beliefs, values, or preferences are the same, and that just about any book could be considered objectionable by someone. As you may have gathered, I'm definitely not in favor of these bills that have been cropping up in some states that apply broadly to the entire state and may put either severe fines or criminal charges on libraries or librarians. I don't think that that sort of thing is reasonable. And I don't think that restricting access to information in general is a positive thing. And of course, there will be exceptions. There might be nonfiction books where the information is just plain inaccurate. There might be fiction books where the content is just really not age appropriate for a certain age group. There might be books where the content is frankly kind of dangerous. Like, for instance, I wouldn't recommend putting books about how to build a bomb on public library shelves. But in general, if the only objection to a book is that it contains difficult themes or controversial subject matter, I don't think that that's usually a strong reason to remove it from library shelves. And I think that having access to a wide variety of books and having the freedom to exercise personal choice in what we choose to read is something to be celebrated. So, with that all said, happy Banned Books Week.